Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unleash Your Voice. I'm your host, Priya Sam, and today I have a solo episode for you. I am going to talk about something that every leader who wants to be seen, recognized, and remembered needs: your three key power stories. They are your origin story, your impact story, and your vision story. And when I say people who want to be seen as leaders, I don't just mean people who have leadership titles, right? You could be a senior individual contributor, someone who's trying to build out a personal brand for yourself within your company, especially those of you who work at bigger companies. And even as an individual contributor, you need to stand out and have your own personal brand, right? These stories are the stories you need. If you're someone who's an executive who is speaking on panels and at events, doing podcast interviews, you need these three key stories. If you are doing interviews right now in this competitive market where it is harder than ever to stand out, you need these three stories. Because here's the truth: experience alone doesn't make you stand out, right? Your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your list of achievements, all of that is important, but it's not what people remember. It's not what makes you stand out. What truly makes you unforgettable are the stories you tell consistently. Stories that stick, stories that signal your leadership, your credibility, and your vision. And you'll notice that I said stories you tell consistently because you don't just tell these stories one time, you need to tell them over and over again. I'm sure those of you who have, people that you follow and admire, maybe it's somebody like a Steve Jobs or a Brene Brown, or maybe it's a celebrity. If you've listened to multiple interviews with them, you've likely heard them tell the same stories over and over again. And that's because you have to do that. That is how you build your brand. Whether you are a celebrity, whether you are an executive, whether you are an IC building out your reputation at your company, you need to tell the same stories over and over again, because that's how people across your organization get to know you. And then when they're in rooms that you are not in, they're going to connect over your stories, right? When someone brings up your name for an opportunity and someone else is like, oh, hey, yeah, that person told me about this project that they worked on. They'd be a great fit for this. That's how those connections are made. So that's why you need to have some key stories that you tell over and over again. Because when you start telling those stories strategically, something shifts. People see you differently. They start to trust you, and your name starts coming up in those rooms that matter. So today I'm going to walk you through the three power stories you need to establish yourself as a leader. The first one is your origin story, and this is your why. Every leader has a story of how they got here. Your origin story is really what humanizes you and builds instant connection. It answers the question, why do you do what you do? So, when you think of how do you use the story practically, it's an elevated way to answer tell me about yourself in a job interview and to stand out right from the start. Way better than summarizing your resume like everyone else does. If you're someone who speaks on panels or leads company meetings, a concise version of this story should be used in every single introduction. This isn't about rattling off your resume. It's about anchoring your journey in a moment, a turning point, or a decision that shaped your path. And again, you want to tell this story over and over again so it becomes part of your brand, whether you're an individual contributor or an executive. Your origin story is also what builds relatability, and it can help people understand your passion and your values. My own origin story led to me getting opportunities to speak at conferences and events when I worked at Salesforce. And those high visibility opportunities led to a raise and a promotion that was my first multi six figure salary. So let me tell you how I use that story. First of all, this was my origin story for tech, how I ended up in tech. So I would tell the story. Those of you who've been around for a while, I used to be a morning show host and news anchor. So I had this whole strategy around how I would share this origin story. So let me just give you one very specific example. In 2023, I was moved onto a brand new team. This is when I was working at Salesforce. I had gone from a team where I was very close to my manager. He was championing me, putting my name out there for high visibility opportunities, to being on a team where I knew no one. I didn't know my new manager. I didn't know any of the executives on my team. We all got flown to New York for 3 days for training and networking. And I knew that I had to use this opportunity to build relationships with senior executives who would have a say over whether I got promoted, whether I got a raise, and whether I got the high visibility opportunities I was looking for. And that year in particular, my goal was to speak at more conferences and events on behalf of Salesforce. So I have 3 days. Some of these leaders, we were hybrid at the time. Some of these leaders I might not see again for another year. So it's really important to maximize these opportunities. So I had a whole strategy. Every time I met an executive, I knew I wanted to ask them, "Hey, how did you end up working in tech?" Give them the space to share their origin story. And what happens when we ask someone a question and we show genuine and authentic interest, we automatically build trust with them. So that's why you want to start by asking someone else to share a part of their story. And then humans are reciprocal beings. So I knew that those executives, after sharing their stories, were going to say, "Oh, what about you? How did you end up in tech?" And then that was my opportunity to share my own origin story. So I would say, "Well, actually, I had a whole other career before I started working in tech. I worked in television. I was a news anchor and morning show host. And that's really where I honed my storytelling craft. I learned how to tell compelling stories that captured the attention of an audience. I learned how to build relationships really quickly because I was constantly interviewing, CEOs, politicians. I would interview people on the best days of their lives and also on the worst days of their lives. So I had to be able to read a room and build rapport quickly. And when I was looking for a career to pivot into, and I heard about the solutions consultant role, it just seemed perfect because I knew it would be a new opportunity to use my storytelling and presentation skills, and also where I could translate those rapport and trust building skills into the corporate world. So that's really how I ended up in tech. And actually, since we're chatting, I would just love to mention that one of my goals for this year is to really bring all of that together and to do more speaking and presenting on behalf of the company. So if you hear of any opportunities, I would love to be considered. How well did that story land for you? Right? I don't sound like I'm bragging. I don't sound like I'm just jumping in and asking for something because I've already laid this beautiful foundation of trust and rapport. And then I just told this story that naturally dovetailed into my goal for the year. If you're listening to this episode and you're already thinking, "I need to build my power story bank, I need the key stories that I will use to stand out while I'm networking, in job interviews, when I'm having conversations with leaders and executives, doing internal and external networking." If that sounds like you need that personal power story bank. It will be such a game changer for you. And I will help you build it inside the Unleash program. The next cohort is open for enrollment now, and I do have a special promotion for anyone who signs up before October 30th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to know more, you want to find out if this is right for you, and you want to accelerate your career, whether or not you join, then book a free career accelerator call with me. They're only available for this week. And I'll do some deep dive discovery into where you're at right now. And then we can chat about whether the Unleash program is the right fit for you. All right, back to the episode. So your origin story can be used very strategically in situations like that. Now, that's just one example, right? In a job interview, it can be your tell me about yourself story. If you're introducing yourself at a company meeting or at a panel or an event, that can also be your origin story. Okay, let's move on to number 2, your impact story. And this is your proof. Connection is powerful, but it's not everything. To be seen as a trusted expert, you need to show the receipts. Your impact story really demonstrates your track record of impact. So, this is where I teach clients to use frameworks like my Power Star framework or the CAPE framework. If you've been to my master class, you're familiar with that one. These frameworks show you how to not just tell what you did, but how to highlight the themes of your leadership. So, think about a time that you solved a complex problem, maybe led through uncertainty or created measurable results. Those are the kinds of stories you want to focus on for your impact story. This story is meant to build trust and to signal, I've done this before and I can do it again, right? We want to show patterns in our impact story. So, if you are thinking, for example, maybe the goal of telling the story in a job interview is to show how you can turn an underperforming team into a top performing team. So in that case, you want to give at least two examples of how you've done that in the past. Now, this story was actually a game changer for one of my clients recently. She was a senior director. She'd been interviewing for VP level roles, and she wasn't getting past the first or second round interviews. So when we started working together, I did a deep dive on how she was answering interview questions, and the biggest gap I noticed was that she wasn't focusing on her impact and connecting the projects she had worked on to larger business goals she had helped to achieve or strategic initiatives that she had helped to fulfill. So, what we did is we honed in on a few of her key stories. One of them was about a time when she was working in consumer packaged goods and she was tasked with saving an underperforming brand. So, what we did here is we built out a full story using my signature Power Star framework. So, that is my Power Story framework layered on top of the STAR interview framework. That means the story had a strong hook, memorable details, listed all of her actions using leadership language to show how she led, and it also highlighted results. Finally, it came full circle with an engaged tie in. This is a key part of the Power Story framework, right? Because what I mean by an engaged tie in is that you need to tie the story back to why it's relevant to the person you're speaking to. So, in a job interview, for example, after using this story to answer a question, she would remind the interviewer why this story was relevant to the job she was interviewing for. If you're sharing something like your impact story on a panel, then you want to at the end tie in to why it's relevant to the audience you're speaking to. So that part of a story framework is really important no matter what situation you're in. You always want to tie back at the end to the audience that's in front of you, whether that's one person in a job interview or a room full of people when you are speaking on a panel. When you have that impact story, and it's actually even better, especially if you are interviewing for jobs, to have multiple impact stories to show different parts of your leadership and different parts of what sets you apart as in the role that you are in. I would suggest having at least three impact stories if you're interviewing for jobs. And if you're somebody who right now is really focused on building out your personal brand, then having that one really strong impact story is a great starting point. All right, let's move to number 3, which is your vision story. This is your what's next because leaders aren't just defined by their past, they are defined by their vision for the future. Your vision story answers, where are you going? What do you want to create? What's your unique perspective on your industry? When you share this story with clarity and confidence, then you position yourself as someone worth betting on, someone with direction, someone who inspires others to get behind them and their vision. So, this story is really great for building visibility. It shows you're not just focused on tasks, but that you're thinking big picture. This is the story that makes decision makers say, she's not just ready for this role, she's ready for the next one too. Aside from telling this story in job interviews, on panels, or in a keynote, it's also a great focus for your LinkedIn content. Building your personal brand on LinkedIn as a leader isn't just a nice to have anymore, it's crucial, especially if you're someone who's working towards a multi six figure salary, a senior title, a bigger leadership role, right? Being seen as an industry expert, your vision story is really crucial for that. So there you have it, the 3 power stories every leader needs. Origin story, your why, your impact story, which is your proof, and your vision story, which is your what's next. When you weave these stories into conversations, networking, job interviews, presentations, and even casual coffee chats, you are no longer just someone with experience. You become someone with presence, authority, and influence. And that's how you establish yourself as a leader people remember, trust, and want to follow. Oh, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't know how to tell those stories yet, that's exactly the work I do with my clients because the right story doesn't just get you noticed, it gets you the opportunities, the recognition, and yes, the money you deserve. So, if you want to learn more about how we can work together to build your stories, I am offering free career accelerator calls for this month only. So, send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Priya Sam, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Priya Sam. You'll also find links to my profiles in the show notes. Until next time, happy storytelling. And remember, your stories are the one thing you have that no one else has. I'll see you next time.